to you all to this, the first of our Teresa days, and welcome to those joining us in other parts of the world and through this modern technology. So the centenary of her birth has been celebrated 4 times before now. But I really know nothing about how it was celebrated. But it would probably be very interesting to look back over 1615, 1715, 1815, 1915. The different worlds, each of them completely different worlds. Where did Teresa fit in each of these times? How was she seen? How was she celebrated? It would be very interesting to do so. But perhaps more importantly to think 2115, 100 years from now, who will be celebrating Teresa? How will she be celebrated? We don't know the answer to that. But it is something that we clearly need to keep in mind. If we think back 100 years ago, obviously in the midst of the First World War, Britain in particular very much engaged in that, and that would have dominated people's lives so much that centenary of Teresa would probably have been very much in the background. However, if we look at the history of the Carmelite order in England at that time, something very significant was going on. In the next 20 years, more or less straight after the centenary of Teresa, I think something like 30 Carmelite convents will be founded in England in such a short space of time. A phenomenal growth in that particular expression of the Teresian comparison, Carmelite convents. Coming from Notting Hill, Mother Mary of Jesus there. That phenomenal time of grace, work of the Holy Spirit, happening here in Britain. I don't know if there's any other time in the history of the Carmelite order that so many foundations of Carmelite nuns were made in such a short space of time. And in very unlikely circumstances. England wouldn't be the place you'd expect that to happen or how it happens, but we're not going to that. But I just want to draw attention to it, because probably nobody in 1515 would have dreamt of that. Notting Hill had made, I think, 3 foundations before the war. Liverpool, Kirkgate, and I think one other. They were trying to build Preston Carmel during the war and keep the War Office away from it. The War Office are trying to get their hands on the building. So welcome to you all again, and we'll begin for this time, and welcome to those joining us from all parts of the world who are looking in on this. And this first conference, as I've given it 2 little phrases as the title. I was born for you, coming from the poem that we read at the end of the last session. For you, of course, being God. I wanted to live. That's a phrase taken from chapter 8 of the book of her life, expressed at a particular time when she becomes very aware that she's not living fully, not living as life is meant to be lived. So what I want to do in this talk is try to explore a little bit Teresa's coming to life. Her being born, her coming into life, which is a whole lifelong process. And I've given you a page there, a handout, where I just want to look at it from 5 different aspects. And why am I doing this? It isn't just out of interest. I'm doing it because it's essential for our understanding of Teresa's teaching. When we look at what Teresa has taught us, her writings, the main source for her writings is her life experience. Or more specifically, her experience of living beside, in relationship with, Jesus Christ. That life experience is the main source of everything she writes. I only write what I know from experience, she tells us. So we'll try and look at a little of her experience. And the first aspect I've entitled here, A Life Lived and Given. That's not a great title, but I didn't know what to come up with. It's something to do with a life lived with radical self-giving, or limitless self-giving. And that, as I said, is what's celebrated in that poem that's chosen as the theme for this centenary year. It's a celebration of that. That total giving of self. Whatever it is that God wants. With no personal agenda or self-interest or anything else getting in the way. Because the conclusion that Teresa comes to, or that her life experience brings her to, is that the great obstacle to living are our attachments. All that limits our freedom. All that limits the deep inner freedom that's needed to live. There's a text in the book of her Foundations when she's speaking about the nuns in the new Carmels that she has founded. And the 2 things she picks out that they're strong in is desires and detachment. And then she goes on to specify that if something goes wrong, if things do not work out well, the place to look for the cause, we might say, the cause is going to be a lack of detachment. A lack of inner freedom. That's what's going to be the root cause of whatever the crisis may be. I put in here from time to time, just referring you to various texts that people might want to look at. Look there at Life, chapter 11. But so this comes up many, many times. What I want to have a look at briefly is the third of the texts that I mentioned here under this particular heading. And it is written by Teresa little over a year before she died. So we're towards the end of her life. It's the last of these spiritual testimonies, or relations as they're called in some editions. Either edition, it will be the last one, written in 1581. And I just want to read a little bit of it, where she's now inviting us into her inner world. And the kind of life that she's living. Okay, I'll just begin. This attachment to loving God doesn't diminish. In fact, in my opinion, it increases along with the desire to serve Him. So she's already given us great, no other attachment now lives in her whatsoever but the attachment to this love of God. That doesn't diminish. Just to give a little bit of it. Hence, I sometimes fear, although not with pain and disturbance as before, that my soul is in a stupor, and I am not doing anything, because I cannot do penance. Acts of desire for suffering and martyrdom and to see God have no force. I am usually not able to make them. It seems I live only to eat and sleep, and not suffer in anything. And even this doesn't bother me, although sometimes, as I say, I fear lest I be deceived. But I am not able to believe that I am, because from all I discern, there doesn't reign in me any strong attachment. Sticky. As I doesn't reign in me any strong attachment. That is the key. Should either to any creature as anything in this world, or to all the glory of heaven. Nothing in our next. There's no attachment. Only love. Only to loving this God of ours. That's where she has arrived at. I only need the satisfaction of knowing whether I am going along all right or whether I can do something. That's all. There's this total inner freedom to live, to accept whatever life brings along, whatever may happen, whatever the future may hold. There is that total freedom to accept that. So that is, we might say, in the depths where she has arrived at. Living life with that fullness and that freedom. And ultimately, the freedom is the freedom to give of oneself. That is the greatest expression of human freedom, to give of oneself. And that is the freedom that her life journey brings her to. The second aspect that I've picked out here, titled A Life of Christian Maturity. Well, what one could call it, I suppose, is a life, a mature relationship with Jesus Christ. A life that has grown and matured in her relationship with Jesus Christ. her relationship with Jesus Christ being the relationship that has brought her to life. The relationship in which she becomes fully alive, fully herself. And I have given a few texts here, but those of you familiar with, I think most of you are very familiar with Teresa's writings, really where she, but the important part here, this is what the text I'm taking up, from chapter 23 to 31 of the book of her life. There the chapters Teresa brings us, since into the depths of her personal experience of Jesus. And her struggle to understand, and we could say be reconciled with that experience. I give a quote here at the beginning of chapter 23. She's writing the book of her life. And this is the real beginning of the book. It's chapter 23. Tells us this is a new book from now on. I mean a new life, she said. The life dealt with up until this point was mine. But now it is the one that God lives in me. And this is for her the real life. The life that God lives in her. That's what she wants to write about. But she's taken 22 chapters to introduce us to that. To set the scene for us. More than half the book is given to introducing it. Because we need that in order to understand. But now she's going to take us into the depths of her relationship with Jesus. And I've just picked out two aspects of it here. First one from chapter 26. And the background to this, we're in 1559, and the Inquisition, the index of forbidden books, and many of the books that Teresa liked and relied upon were taken off of her. And for a woman who loved books, loved words, who famously told us, I'm only happy when I have a new book, this would be a devastating experience, traumatic experience for her. And she hears these words of the Lord deep within her. Don't be sad. I shall give you a living book. He's going to become the living book for her. Or more specifically, her experience of Jesus is the living book. And that's rather important for us to understand that distinction. It's not Jesus sort of in some theoretical sense, or a Jesus that other people are telling her about, or presenting to her in wonderful theological language and all of that. It's the Jesus that she comes to know within her, personally. And that's going to be the struggle, to reconcile the two of those. Because she tells us she heard this, but she had no idea what it meant. Because she said she never had any experience like this before now. She never had any visions or anything before now. So she couldn't understand what this could mean. And it is in chapter 27 that there's the key experience. That's the book a chapter I want to come back to in the afternoon and for us to prayerfully listen to. Sometimes described by commentators as the decisive moment for Teresa. Where she becomes aware in a very profound way of the presence of Jesus in her life. The continual presence of Jesus in her life. But that becomes a great struggle for her. Struggle to know what it is, understand it, because on the one hand, she knows perfectly well it's Jesus, with an absolute certainty that's with him, but she doesn't know how she knows. She cannot put it into words. This woman who's always able to put something into words. In this chapter, unlike so many other places in her life, she can't find an image. Teresa loved imagery, familiar with her writing. She always comes up with an image somewhere, a castle, a butterfly, water. She'll always come up with an image to describe. Here she goes through several images and they all fail her. No image will work here. So she's faced with the problem of trying to understand it for herself, find some image or words to put on it for herself. She then has the difficulty of trying to explain it to the confessors, spiritual directors, assessors who have asked her to write this, and to try and explain it for others. And of course she can't do this. Or maybe more, she does something for us much more important than that. And it is that she takes us right into the experience of not understanding. The great treasure of these particular chapters of the book of Teresa's life is not that they explain things to us. They do a certain amount of that. But that they don't explain. And sometimes we can be put off by that. Oh, she's talking about visions and all kinds of experience that are totally outside of our way of knowing anything, so they're irrelevant. No. In fact, we've got to go there with her. We've got to feel her struggle to understand, to put words on this. We've got to feel her confusion, her fears, her deep anxieties here. We've got to feel the struggle. Be there with her in it. Because that's the real experience of Jesus here. He's becoming real for her.